Rats were silently scurrying across the ship's deck. The date was October 1347. The port of Messina. When the ships docked, the sailors who came ashore, exhausted, were on the verge of death. Black swellings, the size of eggs, were appearing on their bodies. Some of the swellings were bleeding profusely. Some sailors, however, collapsed on the ground in the harbor and never got back up. No warning. No explanation. Just death, slowly descending from a ship onto the shore. And what makes this truly devastating is this: between 1347 and 1351, nearly half of Europe's total population perished. Villages fell silent. Fields lay untilled throughout the summer. In some towns, people could not keep up with burying their dead. 25 million people perished. So, was the Black Death merely a catastrophe? Or did it insidiously shape the world as we know it today? Why did it shatter the churches, the most powerful institutions in European history, and how did it transfer that power to the people? And perhaps the biggest question on everyone's mind: what if this catastrophe had never happened? What kind of place would Europe occupy in today's world order? Today we'll answer all these questions. In this video, how the plague pandemic reshaped feudal power, why the church was unable to regain its authority for a long time, the hidden economic revolution that followed the Black Death, and the question of alternative history that changed everything. Let's clarify the timeline. The date is October 1347, a fleet drops anchor in the port of Messina. Port authorities ordered the plague-ridden ships to leave the port immediately. It was already too late. By 1348, the plague had crossed the Alps and reached France. In 1349, it entered England. By 1351, it had continued to spread rapidly as far as Scandinavia and deep into Eastern Europe. It spared neither the devout nor the nobility. A priest was killed in the middle of a sermon, a doctor was killed at his patient's bedside. Modern historians are clear, they say the plague was caused by a bacterium carried by fleas on rats, Yersinia pestis. The trade networks of the Middle Ages continued to operate unnoticed for years. But for the society left in the wake of the plague, the situation was entirely different. It was not merely a disease, to them, it was a reckoning. History gives us reasons to pause and reflect. In the year 541, the Justinian Plague devastated the Byzantine Empire at the height of its power and halted the process of Roman reunification. In the year 165, the Antonine Plague wiped out most of the soldiers in the Roman army returning from Mesopotamia. It began to erode the Roman Empire from within. For thousands of years, the same cycle has repeated itself. The plague comes not merely as the Black Death, but as a force that reshapes humanity. It does not merely destroy, it also determines the course of events that follow. The church offered prayers. People were left helpless. And in that silence where God should have spoken, something began to take shape in the collective consciousness of Europe. For centuries, the church had held a monopoly on the meaning of life. It explained suffering, death, and why everything was the way it was. When the plague struck, none of these explanations held up. For some, it was simply a tragedy. But among the rising merchant and intellectual classes, it was an invitation. If the church could not explain this catastrophe, perhaps it did not hold all the answers. There is something that emerged in the wake of the plague and is rarely mentioned in most history books. When nearly half of a continent's workforce is wiped out, the survivors become more valuable than ever before. Peasants who have been intertwined with the land for generations suddenly found themselves in a position where they could demand wages, move elsewhere, or refuse to work. Landowners realized that their absolute power now required negotiation. The rigid, hereditary feudal system, which had persisted for centuries, began to crack from within. The first labor movement in European history was born in a field emptied by the plague. Exactly 25 million people died. And as they died, they gave the survivors something no revolution had ever achieved: leverage. For the first time in centuries, the people at the very bottom of society possessed something those at the top desperately needed: their labor and their very existence. This catastrophe paved the way for something new. To understand what happened afterward, one must first understand what came before. By the early 14th century, Europe was already under strain. Farming on marginal lands. A population that had grown beyond what the land could sustain. A rigid feudal system with no mechanisms to improve the plight of the lower classes. Then the plague struck. And within 4 years, it achieved what no peasant army, no reformist thinker, and no political movement had been able to do: it rendered the old order unsustainable. From depopulated cities and shattered certainties, the Renaissance was born, and a civilization rebuilding itself chose to view the world differently this time.